New Zealand phenomenon built a racing motorcycle with his own hands for the prestigious Grand Prix 500 class.
To build a V8 motorcycle, travel the world on it, and set world drag racing records.
Bert set numerous speed records while simultaneously increasing its engine capacity.
He stood out by racing and winning on a motorcycle he built himself.
He installed an engine of his own design into a reinforced bicycle frame and rode it so fast that his record could not be officially broken for 23 years.
Kim Newcombe was born in Nelson, New Zealand in '44 and grew up in Auckland, where he met the love of his life, Janine. After marrying, Kim and Janine moved to Australia in '63 to fulfill Kim's passion for motorcycle racing in a better country. Soon Kim got into water racing, which had a big impact on his life. As a ship engine mechanic in Melbourne in the late '60s, Newcombe first encountered the Konig outboard motor. Kima was blown away by this simple and powerful engine, and he wanted to meet the person behind its creation. In the year 1968, Kim meets Dieter Konig, who offered Kim a position at his factory located in Germany. Shortly after beginning work at Konig, Kim was given a captivating chance to merge the Konig engine with a motorbike. Because the Konig initially lacked a transmission, Kim had to install one. To create space for the box, we needed to raise the lengthy engine slightly from the rear, resulting in a unique and unconventional look. Another issue was cooling, because similar to most outboard motors, Konig cools using water in which it is directly positioned. Through some tinkering, we've come up with a kick-ass radiator and a one-of-a-kind crankcase cooling system, the tubular magnesium tray with its own water cooling. This skid plate obstructed placing the exhaust underneath, so the cylinders were flipped and the exhaust was directed upwards, next to the intake. The fully vertical intake holes with downward draft also caused problems, since most motorcycle carburetors had side draft. This required the use of the American Tillotson diaphragm, designed for multi-position use. In Konig, a disc was used, moved by a toothed belt, rotating 90 degrees on the right side of the engine, above the crankcase. The expansion chamber exhaust is essential for properly tuning a two-stroke engine, and Konig was one of the pioneering motorcycles to use massive chambers, which later became a common and widely adopted feature on two-stroke motorcycles in the industry. Despite the flaws in the already built prototypes, the Konig 500 turned out to be a cutting-edge machine. For that time, it was a kick-ass design, packed with a bunch of innovations that later became the gold standard for two-stroke racing engines. In 1969, when the initial prototype was constructed, it was producing 68 horsepower and boasted a number of impressive specifications. Konig earned a reputation as a fast motorcycle when it didn't blow up and didn't eat gears. In 1970, the power was increased to 75 horsepower, which was a serious feat for a motorcycle weighing just over 113 kilograms. Later versions had a power of about 90 horsepower. Knowing Konig better than anyone else, Kim wanted to fix its flaws and make it reliable. It was inevitable that Kim would become the primary driver. He started racking up victories at an astonishing pace. Rumors about the German-made motorcycle dominating the roads quickly spread. The fans in the area went wild. Kim became a highly regarded racer, rapidly obtaining an FIM license and demonstrating his expertise in road racing as well. And this was on a motorcycle that he actually constructed himself, that he maintained himself and repaired himself. As a greenhorn with no experience, Kim had to work with a tight budget. While participating in the 572 Grand Prix, he worked solo, fixing his motorcycle between races. Despite Factory Brigade's difficulties with less than ideal funding, Kim achieved noticeable success. He took third place in the grueling Grand Prix of West Germany, held at the Nürburgring, during his first performance on the legendary challenging track. He was constantly getting on the podium. After winning the Grand Prix of Yugoslavia, the New Zealand underdog with a Kiwi bird on his helmet became the championship leader in points. An unknown racer who built his own motorcycle based on a boat engine turned the racing world upside down. By the end of the season, Kim and his Konig were invited to a series in Great Britain at the Silverstone track. There were rumours that John Player Norton's team was planning to take on Konig on their home turf, and they offered Kim a pretty good amount for it. The race wasn't anything serious, but she gave Kim the opportunity to earn extra money until the end of the season, and he was just thrilled to be invited. A 680 cubic version of Konig was prepared, and Konig and Kim crossed La Manche with their family to participate in the event. The day before the race, Kim took a stroll to familiarize himself with the track. He noticed that one specific section of the slope had a dangerous dip right before a sharp turn, surrounded by a wall made of wooden beams. Worried about safety, he reached out to Vernon Cooper, the track manager, with a request to put the hay in front of the wall. Cooper was pissed off. He angrily rejected Kim and threatened to bite him off if he dares to complain again. The next day, on August 11th, Kim was leading the race for 6 laps before making a mistake at the Stowe, flying off the track and crashing into the wall. They took him to the local hospital while he was unconscious. Kim never regained consciousness, and on August 14th his brain was declared dead. He was 29 years old and posthumously placed second in the 1973 500 Grand Prix, defeating Agostini and finishing behind Phil Reed. Kim Newcomb, an underdog in the Grand Prix races, yet a bold and talented driver who challenged class differences and surprised the world by defied expectations and shook the racing world with his remarkable skills. No one expected that a friendly, quiet New Zealander would challenge the racing hierarchy, let alone lead the 500 class world championship, working almost entirely independently and performing at the highest level of sports. Back in the day, he was a legend, gone too soon in the prime of his life, in the most unfortunate circumstances.
AJ Potter traveled around America and participated in various events. Potter, like others, was known for building a drag monster using a 220 kg small block Chevy V8 engine that generated 500 horsepower. This powerful engine was installed on a motorcycle frame. It goes without saying that Potter's creation was unprecedented and unmatched at the time. Potter was a self-taught mechanical genius. Usually he walked along the track either for the best time or for the highest speed recorded at the finish that day, aiming to set a new record. AJ did not want to win any prizes, he simply showed up and attracted people to come and observe him. Fans came not only to see how fast he was driving, but also because there was always a chance that it would be the last ride of the Michigan Madman. Extreme vibrations of a huge V8 motorcycle, the sound, constantly slipping rear wheel, which inevitably began to throw the motorcycle from side to side. All this and almost endless burnout until the very finish represented a unique spectacle. At the end of Potter's performances, fans consoled themselves with the fact that this time they almost saw his last ride and will definitely come for a ticket to the next performance of the Madman. Until the start of the 70s, Potter slowly installed Chevy V8 engines of growing displacement and concurrently established drag racing world records. The last 7th, with 3 Bloody Mary Widows, had an engine of 5.7 liters or 350 cubic inches in American style and a power of 500 horsepower. Starting with the Bloody Mary, Potter experimented with a homemade clutch from a Harley-Davidson drum brake, which limited his maximum speed to 182 kilometers per hour, but when he was promised to be paid $1 for every kilometer after 160 kilometers per hour or 100 miles per hour, he replaced the clutch with his own direct drive system. This quickly raised his finish speed to 218 kilometers per h or 136 miles per hour, and to receive $36 for each race in the early 1960s, that is very good money. To be specific, it's over $300 per race today, for a self-taught person, a young daredevil, living only by idea. Later he earned $150 per ride. By the way, the rear tire lasted only 3 such races. The direct drive was the only transmission option for his motorcycles. The last Widow was built on the same principle, making it the final one. The power unit of the 7th number also had aluminum Bordex heads, forged pistons, a Vertex magneto, and a Kinsler-Hilborn fuel injection. This thing spun up to 7,500 revolutions per minute. But how did this motorcycle start in races without clutches? To do this, Potter made a special stand so that the rear wheel could spin in the air. Elon maintained revs at limit, and when green light appeared at drag strip, he pushed motorcycle off stand, didn't let go of throttle until finish line. A peculiar rodeo. Later in his interviews, Potter came to the conclusion that it was his youthful maximalism that allowed him to complete this project and perform all over the world even at a fairly serious age. In the end, Potter and his widower #7 visited multiple countries globally, like Canada, England and Australia. He He achieved 3 world records, and the final one also granted him the title of fastest motorcycle in the world. Potter's record quarter-mile run lasted for 8.68 seconds, with an exit speed of 276 kilometers per hour. AJ solely worked with what he had, and what he did not have in principle at that particular time. He was a genuine pioneer. He accomplished everything by himself. It was his original idea, his offspring. These honest 500 horsepower, he just sat on them, turned the gas handle to the maximum, and lived through these 400 meters. Every time, every ride.
Bert's story began in the distant year of 1899 in Invercargill, New Zealand. Bert Munro's youth coincided with the beginning of the 20th century, a golden age of technological progress. Trains, airplanes, cars, motorcycles, all of this fascinated the future racer, and Bert decided to see the world beyond the farm. So Bert joined the army. For him, it was a chance to see the world. In 1920, at the age of 21, Bert bought the very fateful Indian Scout motorcycle with the engine number 50, R627. This Indian Scout is the very motorcycle that our hero will never part with throughout his life, will personally modify, and will break numerous speed records on. It is worth noting that in stock, this Indian could only accelerate up to 90 kilometers per hour. Remember this number. Bert Munro began modifying his Indian in 1926. Using homemade tools, he personally crafted various engine parts. For example, he cast pistons in tin cans using his own alloy recipe. 2 parts Chevrolet and 2 parts Ford. Bert called his motorcycle the Munro Special. To manage earning money and working on motorcycles, he had to work as a salesman until the evening and spend all night in the garage working on his machines. In the late 40s, after divorcing his wife, Bert stopped working as a salesman mechanic and locked himself in the garage. Now he dedicated all his free time to refining the Indian. Bert continued to experiment with various materials used in the construction of his motorcycle. He also made a fiberglass fairing for them, trying to reduce air resistance. In the end, very little of the stock Scout remained, but the same number could always be seen on the crankcase. Starting from the 1940s, Bert Munro set numerous New Zealand records. But in 1957, after visiting Bonneville, he set a goal for himself to set records, specifically on this salt lake in Utah, with his small savings and money given to him by friends. In 1962, he set off for America on an old cargo ship. Upon arriving in Los Angeles, Bert buys an old station wagon for $90, hooks up a trailer with his Indian, and sets off on his own to Utah to the Bonneville Salt Flats. Bert visited Bonneville a total of 10 times. The first time was in 1957, when he became inspired to set speed records there. The remaining 9 times he participated in the races. When Bert participated in a race at Bonneville for the first time in his life, he set a record of 178 miles per hour. The engine displacement of his motorcycle was 850 cubic centimeters. Later, Bert would set 2 more records, 168 miles per hour in 1966 and 183 miles per hour in 1967. The engine displacement of his Scout at that time was 950 cubic centimeters. In one of the qualifying runs, Bert reached a speed of 200 miles per hour. That's approximately 320 kilometers per hour, but officially, this run was not counted. After his name was misspelled in an American motorcycle magazine, he changed his name from Bert to Bird. English experts and the English will correct me in the comments. The Munro Special endured numerous breakdowns and crashes. Many homemade parts were sacrificed to the god of speed. Pistons, cylinders, connecting rods, valves. But it was that very Indian with the number 50, R627, that made it to his main record-breaking run. In 1975, due to deteriorating health, doctors prohibited him from participating in official races. Nevertheless, Bert continued to race on his motorcycles. Doctors believed that his health was undermined by numerous injuries sustained in accidents. Realizing that he wouldn't be able to ride after the stroke, but wanting to leave his motorcycles in his homeland, he sold them to a local enthusiast. On January 6, 1978, after an afternoon walk, Bert's heart stopped. His motorcycles are now owned by one of the motorcycle enthusiast clubs on the South Island. In 1971, a documentary film about Bert Munro was made, titled Offerings to the God of Speed. In 2005, a film titled The World's Fastest Indian was made about the life and adventures of Bert Munro, which brought the New Zealand racer worldwide fame.
The story goes that young Georgiatis has been fascinated by technology from an early age. In 1968, in Canada, Andreas met Honda, which later completely changed his perception of technology and revealed his innate talent for innovation. As the racing press would later write, he achieved the impossible by making the first successful attempt to build a racing motorcycle with a car engine and winning a race with it. This motorcycle became the AGS prototype, named in honor of his companion, now his wife, and it stood for Andreas Susan Georgiatis. Upon seeing the Honda S600 in Canada, Andreas remarkably realized that his small 4-cylinder engine would fit perfectly into the Norton Manx frame. Removing the water jackets, Andreas converted the engine to air cooling. Then, the cylinder heads were replaced with those featuring 2 overhead camshafts and 4 valves per cylinder from a Honda racing kit. Sleeves were added to the cylinders to strengthen the block and reduce tolerances, and the chain drive for the timing mechanism was converted to a belt with homemade couplings, demonstrating that he was years ahead of what manufacturers were offering. As a result, a racing motorcycle with a displacement of 500 cubic centimeters was created, which handled corners somewhat clumsily but was extremely powerful and fast for its time. In one of his letters to the race organizers, Andreas mentions his titles and reveals the specifications of his vehicle. He claims that his AGS develops 100 horsepower and is capable of reaching speeds of 290 kilometers per hour on straightaways. The stock S600 engine produced only 57 horsepower. Andreas nearly doubled that output. Over time, his prototype underwent numerous changes, including fairings, an unusually beautiful exhaust, and even disc brakes. From 1968 to 1970, Andreas Georgiatis repeatedly became a winner with his creation. Having a successful racing career, including the national championship in Canada, he at one point decides to hang up his racing suit and continue his passion for combining cars and motorcycles in more civilian versions.
The famous Glenn V8 prototype was practically equipped with a prototype of an aircraft engine. Curtis realized that the motorcycle that would define his future motorcycle career and overshadow all achievements in that field had to have a V8. In response to several requests from early aviation experimenters, Curtis developed his first V8 engine. He then asks his team to build a motorcycle frame strong enough to withstand this engine and plans to see how fast he can accelerate. I remind you that all of this happened more than 100 years ago. People were just beginning to explore the airspace, and no one was even thinking about land speed records. At that time, the fastest things on Earth were trains no one thought about it, except for Glenn Curtis. His ultralight V8 for its time had a monstrous displacement of 4.4 liters. It featured air cooling, a 90-degree cylinder bank angle, and an almost square ratio, meaning the diameter and stroke of the piston were nearly equal. The power of this machine reached 40 horsepower. At that time, Harleys and Indians were just bicycles with engines producing 2 horsepower. A huge 4-liter V8 and a steel frame. That's it. Oh yes, there was also a seat. No gearbox, no clutch. The drive was simply achieved through a drive shaft from the crankshaft, as at that time no belt or chain could handle such power. There was also no exhaust system. One can only imagine how loudly this beast roared. By the way, there were no brakes either. On January 23, 1907, on Ormond Beach, Florida, Curtis mounted this monster wearing only a leather suit, goggles, and a cap. At that time, there were no helmets, just as there were no brakes. People also believed that at such speeds, a person simply wouldn't be able to breathe. On that day, Glenn Hammond Curtis traveled along a 4-kilometer stretch of sand and reached an astonishing speed of 218 kilometers per hour. Contrary to popular belief, he did not suffocate. To better understand how fast this was, it is important to know that all previous speed records were set by trains, and airplanes were just beginning to fly. To this day, it remains the only motorcycle in the world that held the absolute speed record. In other words, there was absolutely nothing on Earth that was faster at that time. Just think about it. Officially, Glenn Hammond Curtis's motorcycle record would be broken only 23 years later by Joseph Wright in August 1930. And production motorcycles would only learn to reach such speeds by the early 1970s. Glenn Curtis, to put it in the language of a sportsman, left undefeated. He died in the same year, 1930, a month before the new official record. The only downside to this story is the fact that this record was not officially registered. Since it was necessary to travel in both directions to set the record, during the second run, the motorcycle's drive shaft failed to withstand the pressure and broke apart at a speed of 90 kilometers per hour. But this did not stop the newspapers from dubbing Glenn Hammond Curtis the fastest man on the planet and forever etching his name in history under the nickname Hill Rider for his otherworldly bravery. Curtis will continue to produce motorcycles for a while longer before fully transitioning to aviation, where he will make an even greater contribution. This may overshadow his remarkable motorcycle history. Nevertheless, his achievements remain true landmarks from the early, frightening, and dangerous days of the sport.